My ex-husband said I was his rock bottom. Then he asked for a second chance. Mark walked into the cafe like a ghost wearing my husband's face. It was a Saturday afternoon, place packed with laptops and couples and screaming milk frothers. My hands shook around my paper cup so badly I was surprised I hadn't worn my coffee. The bell over the door jingled, and there he was, thinner, older, but somehow lighter. He scanned the room, eyes passing right over me once, then snapping back like a rubber band. He froze for a half a second. That used to be my favorite half second, when he'd spot me after a long shift and his whole body would relax. Now it felt like standing on a train track watching the light come at me. Then he smiled. It was stupid how fast my body remembered that smile. My chest did this painful little lurch, like I'd forgotten we'd signed divorce papers 3 years ago, like the last few years of court stamps and separate apartments and crying in grocery store aisles had been a weird dream. "Hey," he said, walking over. Same voice, less gravel in it. "Hey." My own voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. When he hugged me, I felt his ribs through his coat. Mark had always been broad, solid, the kind of guy who made you feel like the couch when he flopped down next to you. Now there was this fragility. Like if I squeezed too hard, I might snap something. Instead of stale booze and unbrushed teeth, he smelled like actual coffee and laundry detergent. Clean, present. "Wow," he murmured, pulling back just enough to look at me. "You look good, Alex." "You too," I lied automatically, then corrected myself. "Different, in a good way." We sat at a little table by the window. The winter light made everything look harsher, too real. My cup left a damp ring on the wooden table. I focused on that because if I looked at his face for too long, I started thinking about vows in front of 50 people who'd all told us we were meant to be. I'm Alex, by the way. 35, former barista, now the guy in the office who brings decent coffee to meetings because he can't handle the machine sludge. Small hometown where everyone at least vaguely knows your business. My best friend Luna calls it Pleasantville with better Wi-Fi. My sister Jenna just calls it a trap. And sitting across from me was Mark, 36, my ex-husband, who nearly drank himself into an early grave while I watched and slowly stopped recognizing him. His hands rested on the table, fingers laced around his cup. No tremor, no telltale redness in his eyes. My gaze dropped to his keys when he set them down. That's when I saw it. A small bronze chip on his keychain, stamped with the number 2 and some slogan about one day at a time. I couldn't stop staring at it. I started with the boring stuff, he said, following my eyes. Rehab, meetings, antidepressants. Turns out my brain's not just sad. It's chemically dramatic. He gave this self-conscious little laugh. "Rehab?" I repeated, because apparently my vocabulary had been reduced to parroting. "Yeah," he nodded, taking a breath. Court-ordered at first, then not. His thumb brushed the chip. 2 years last month. My throat tightened. 2 years. That meant he'd gotten sober after our divorce was finalized, after I'd already left. The question that had been living in the back of my head since he texted me last night settled heavy in my chest. Had asking for the divorce saved us? Or had I abandoned the man I'd vowed to love in sickness and in health, right when he was sickest? "I saw your post," I managed. "On Instagram. 2 years sober and finally happy." He winced. "Yeah, my sponsor says I overshare online." He took another breath, eyes flicking up to mine. "You leaving was my rock bottom." The words landed between us like a dropped plate. My fingers tightened around my cup. I couldn't tell if he was thanking me or blaming me. The way his jaw tensed made me think it was both. Before I could respond, a server appeared at our table with a bright smile. "Can I get you guys anything else?" she chirped, oblivious to the emotional bomb that had just gone off. I flinched, forcing my face into something neutral while my brain screamed. And for the first time in 3 years, I had no idea whether I'd been the hero of my own story or the villain. 2 nights earlier, none of this existed outside my phone screen. I was on my couch in my tiny apartment, the one with mismatched thrift store furniture and a plant I kept forgetting to water. My TV hummed quietly with some baking show I wasn't really watching. My thumb hovered over my phone, rereading his Instagram caption for probably the 50th time. 2 years sober today. Finally happy. Finally me. There was a photo of him at some gym, sweaty but actually alive behind the eyes. The mark from the last year of our marriage had looked like a washed-out copy of himself. This guy on my screen looked annoyingly good. "Just call him or block him," Luna said from my rug, where she was surrounded by nail polish bottles and my neglected plant. "You're torturing yourself." "I'm not," I started, then sighed because I absolutely was. I scrolled up to old photos, us at the ice rink, us at the crappy diner, us on our wedding day when his tie was crooked and I'd fixed it with shaking hands. Luna scooted closer and snatched my phone. "Okay, sad montage time is over." "Luna, give it back," I said, lunging for it. She held it just out of reach. "You have 2 options. Call him and get closure or whatever. Or block him and move on. But this limbo where you stalk his gym selfies and then cry into my couch every few months? No. My thumb just hovers," I muttered, reaching again. "It's like it weighs a ton." "Then let someone with lighter thumbs handle it." She grinned, and before I could stop her, dropped my phone into my lap. The call screen was open. His name was right there. I stared at it. The green button. The red one. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it over the TV. "Alex," Luna said softly. "Breathe and choose." I sucked in a shaky breath and hit call. It rang once, twice. Each ring stretched out like an entire minute. I almost hung up both times. Then, "Hello?" His voice, familiar enough that my stomach flipped, but clearer than I remembered, less slurred around the edges. Hey, it's Alex. My own voice cracked on my name. There was a long silence. I pulled the phone away to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. I was wondering when you'd call me, he said finally. No anger, just this quiet certainty that made my palms sweat. Yeah, sorry, I saw your post. Yeah, he chuckled awkwardly. My sponsor says I overshare online. We did that thing where two people who used to know everything about each other pretend they're strangers. Work, weather, the fact that the new coffee shop on Main Street had decent croissants. My living room felt too small for both my body and his voice. So, he said eventually, would you maybe want to grab coffee? In person? No pressure, just catch up. Yes, I blurted before my brain could list all the reasons not to. I mean, yeah, coffee's good. We settled on Saturday at the downtown cafe. Neutral territory, public, easy exit if one of us bolted. After we hung up, I stared at my dark phone screen like it might explode. Luna watched me with narrowed eyes. You're going to tell your family, right? She asked. Because your mom and Jenna are going to lose their minds if you just slide back into couple photos with no warning. I'll tell them, I said later. Alex, I will, I insisted, shoving my phone under a cushion like that would hide the decision I'd just made. I just need to figure out what this is first. Luna sighed, leaning her head back on the couch. Just remember, closure and reconciliation are not the same thing. At the cafe, sitting across from the man who used to share my last name, I wasn't sure I knew which one I wanted. The server left, and silence settled over us again. Outside, people hurried past in coats and hats. Inside, my entire life felt like it had shrunk to this table. I shouldn't have said it like that, Mark said after a beat. About you leaving being my rock bottom. How did you mean it? I asked, voice steadier than I felt. He rolled the chip between his fingers. It was both, I guess. It hurt more than anything, and it also snapped something in me. In a good way, eventually. But that doesn't make it not hurt. My mind flashed back to another table, another stack of papers. 3 years earlier, the lawyer's office had smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. It was one of those generic spaces with beige walls and framed degrees and a plant that looked as tired as I felt. Rain streaked the window in these long, lazy lines, like even the weather couldn't be bothered to try. I slid the divorce papers across the polished wood toward Mark. My hands shook then too, but for different reasons. He looked like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. Hollow-eyed, unshaven, the bruise on his cheek from walking into a door still faintly visible. His shirt was wrinkled, collar stained. He didn't even pick up the papers at first, just stared at the table between us like something might appear there to save him. Mark, I said, my voice breaking. Please, just read them. He blinked slowly and finally picked up the pen the lawyer had left. His hand trembled. He didn't read. He just signed where the yellow stickies pointed, each stroke of his name another cut I felt in my chest. I don't want this, he mumbled, eyes still on the table. But I can't be who you need. I can't be anything right now. Then go to therapy, I choked out. Please, rehab, something. You can't keep like this. He shrugged, a tiny motion. Doesn't matter. I wanted to scream that it did matter, that I mattered, that the night he'd driven home drunk and hit our mailbox instead of a person had been my last warning shot. But the words tangled up with 3 years of excuses, and he's just stressed, and it'll get better. Mr. and Mr. Carter, the lawyer said gently from the doorway. I'll give you 2 a minute, but we do need to finish up soon. I stood abruptly. We're done. Outside, the rain hit my face like a slap. I walked to my car in a daze, and the signed papers in a folder under my arm. The parking lot was half empty, puddles reflecting gray sky. I stopped by my car door and just stood there. Was I saving myself? Or was I walking away from a severely depressed, binge-drinking spouse who needed help more than he needed consequences? Was I doing what everyone on those anonymous forums said? You can't fix him. Leave before he drags you under? Or was I just abandoning ship when it hit rough water? By the time I got home, my clothes were damp and my teeth were chattering. I went straight to the kitchen, pulled down a bottle of whiskey we kept for guests, and poured myself a double. My hands shook so badly the liquid sloshed over the rim. I downed it too fast, the burn in my throat a distraction from the one in my chest. I poured another. Somewhere between glass 1 and glass 2, it hit me. I was copying the very behavior that had destroyed us. Wow, I muttered to the empty room. Great job, Alex. Really broke the cycle there. I sank to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, glass in hand, and started to cry. Ugly, heaving sobs that made it hard to breathe. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard keys in the lock. Alex, Luna's voice. You didn't answer your phone. I got worried. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Me on the floor, bottle on the counter, glass in my hand, divorce papers half sticking out of my bag. Oh, she said softly. Babe, I left him. I gasped. I left him, and now I'm doing the same. She crossed the room in 3 strides, gently taking the glass from my hand and setting it on the counter. Then she slid down next to me, shoulder pressed to mine. You can't drown with him, Alex, she said quietly. That's not love. That's mutual destruction. I promised, I whispered. In sickness and in health. What if this is the sickness part, and I just bailed? What if the sickness is contagious? She countered. What if the only way either of you gets better is if you get out? A week later, my boss called me into his office. He was a kind guy, mid-40s, tie always slightly crooked. Alex, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I know you've got, stuff going on, but your lateness, the mistakes on the reports, it's starting to look like a pattern. He slid an HR pamphlet across the desk. We have an employee counseling program. It's confidential. Might be worth a call. I stared at the pamphlet. The words blurred. I thought of Mark, of the empty bottles I'd started finding in weird places around our house, of my own glass on the kitchen floor. Thanks, I said, tucking it into my bag like a lifeline. On the way home, I threw out the whiskey. That night, I decided I was done drinking. I wasn't going to become a softer, more functional version of him. Back in the cafe, years and 1,000 tiny choices later, Mark cleared his throat. You want to know about the DUI? He asked. I blinked. Yeah, if you're okay talking about it. He took a long sip of coffee, eyes fixed on some point over my shoulder. It was not my finest moment. He started describing it, and the cafe around us faded. In my mind, I saw him behind the wheel, night smeared with neon and streetlights. He said he'd been just going to the store, but he'd had a few at home first. A few for him back then meant a lot. I remember the lights first, he said. Red and blue in the rear view. Heart doing that panic jump, but I was also numb, like, of course this is happening. The officer had tapped on his window, the sound sharp in the quiet street. Mark had rolled it down, breath thick with alcohol. Sir, have you been drinking tonight? The cop had asked. Mark had tried to smile. Just a couple. Step out of the vehicle, please. He told me about standing on the side of the road, cold seeping through his thin jacket, trying to walk a straight line while the world tilted. The breathalyzer, the numbers, he didn't fully register until later, the handcuffs clicking around his wrists. I kept saying I was sorry, he said, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. Like that would change the reading. I wasn't even thinking about getting arrested. I was thinking, what if I'd hit someone? What if there had been a kid on a bike? They'd put him in a holding cell, gray walls, metal bench. A drunk guy in the corner snored. Mark sat there, head in his hands. It was stupid, he said. But that was the first time I really let myself picture my funeral, my mom, Greg, you, even though we were already over. And I just thought, I'm going to die like this, or worse, I'm going to kill someone like this. He looked at me then, eyes wet, and I decided I was done choosing the bottle over everything, even if I didn't know how to actually be done yet. Hearing him say that my leaving and his DUI had been the things that finally pushed him to change made my stomach twist. Was pain really the only catalyst that worked? Did he have to lose everything and almost his freedom to get better? He talked about court-mandated rehab, fluorescent rooms, plastic chairs, stale coffee. Hi, I'm Mark, and I'm an alcoholic. Over and over until the words dug into his brain. Group sessions where guys twice his age told stories that sounded like his future if he didn't stop. They put a breathalyzer in my car, he added with a humorless smile. Still have it. Gotta blow before I can even start the engine. Real romantic. I didn't know, I said quietly. About any of it. I almost called you, he admitted. From rehab. Phone time was like gold, and I'd sit there, staring at your name in my head, but I didn't think I deserved you. Not after everything. My throat closed up. The cafe suddenly felt too warm. Do you, want to get some air? I asked. He nodded, and we both stood, grabbing our coats like a fire alarm had gone off. Outside, the cold hit my face, sharp and bracing. We walked toward the little park a few blocks away, our breaths puffing in front of us. For a minute, we just listened to the crunch of gravel under our shoes. I still love you, I blurted, because apparently my mouth had given up on consulting my brain. He stopped walking, so did I. He turned to me, eyes wide. Alex, I'm not saying we just pick up where we left off, I rushed. I know it was bad, and I know I was a mess too, but seeing you, hearing all this, if you're willing, I want to try again. Carefully, smarter, I don't know. The silence stretched. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me has been waiting to hear you say that since the divorce, he said finally. But I also need to be honest. My depression isn't magically cured. The meds help, the meetings help, but I still have bad days. I still have thoughts I'm not proud of. I don't need you to be cured, I said. I need you to not shut me out and drown yourself in a bottle while I pretend everything's fine. He gave a small, sad smile. I can promise I'll never stop trying, and I won't shut you out again. Not if you really want to do this. We started walking again, slower this time. In my head, I was weighing two versions of my future. One where I stayed safely single, maybe eventually found someone without this kind of history. One where I risked reliving the worst years of my life for the chance to rebuild with the only man I'd ever really loved. That night back at my apartment, I told Luna everything. She flopped back on my couch, throwing an arm over her face. I love you, but this is like playing with emotional fireworks, dude. I know, I said, pacing. He's different, though. He's present and sober. 2 years sober is amazing, she said, sitting up. But sobriety doesn't erase the trauma, yours or his. I'm not going in blind, I argued. We talked about therapy, boundaries like adults. Your family is going to freak, she warned. They already freaked when I divorced him, I pointed out. Maybe they'll unfreak? Luna snorted. Your mom, maybe. Jenna, absolutely not. She wasn't wrong. The next day, I went to my mom's for lunch. As soon as I walked into the kitchen, the smell of tomato sauce hit me. Home. Mom hummed along to some old song on the radio. Jenna leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. You look nervous, Mom said, wiping her hands on a towel. Everything okay, honey? I had coffee with Mark yesterday, I said, because ripping off the Band-Aid fast seemed kinder. Jenna's head snapped up. Why? We've been talking a little, I said. He's sober now. 2 years. He did rehab, therapy. We're thinking about maybe seeing where things go. You barely survived him last time, Jenna said flatly. I'm not watching that again. Jen, Mom murmured. No, Jenna snapped. He missed Christmas, Mom. Twice. He showed up drunk to my graduation party. Alex had panic attacks every time the phone rang after 8 p.m. because it might be the hospital. He's not that guy anymore, I insisted. He's in treatment. He has a breathalyzer in his car. He's doing the work. Great, she said. He can do the work without dragging you back into it. I'm not being dragged, I said, more sharply than I meant. I'm choosing. Well, I'm choosing not to pretend to be happy about it, Jenna said. I love you, but I'm not clapping for you walking back into a burning building just because the fire inspector put up some new signs. Her words stung because part of me agreed with her. Still, as I left, my phone buzzed. Mark, can I plan a real date? I want to make up for lost time. I stared at the screen, Jenna's voice echoing in my head. I thought about the way his hand had shaken in the lawyer's office versus how steady it had been around his coffee cup yesterday. Yes, I typed. Then, after a second, but we take it slow and we do therapy. Absolutely, he replied almost immediately. I've got something in mind. When he showed up at my house the following Friday, he was grinning like a teenager with a secret. Where are we going? I asked, locking the door behind me. You'll see. He wiggled his eyebrows. His car beeped when he unlocked it, the breathalyzer device blinking from the dashboard. He blew into it, waited for the green light, then started the engine. Romantic, right? He joked. We drove out of town, past the strip malls and into the older part of the city. When he turned into the cracked parking lot of the rundown ice rink, I laughed out loud. No way, I said. This place is still open? Barely, he said. But yeah, thought it was appropriate. The inside was exactly the same. The smell of cold air and old popcorn, the echo of blades on ice, the too loud pop music from a decade ago. He rented us skates, and we sat on the same worn wooden bench where we'd first met at 16, both falling on our faces more than we actually skated. Remember when you knocked me over and then apologized for like 10 minutes? He said, kneeling to lace my skates. I maintain that you cut me off. I replied, though I knew he was right. My cheeks warmed as he tugged the laces snug. The intimacy of it, his hands on my boots, his head bent close to my knees, it all felt achingly familiar. He looked up at me, eyes crinkling. I'll catch you if you eat it, he said softly. Bold of you to assume I won't take you down with me. I shot back, but my voice lacked its usual bite. On the ice, my legs wobbled like they always had. Mark skated backwards in front of me, hands on my waist, steadying. We laughed when I nearly fell, clinging to each other under the harsh fluorescent lights. This is so much harder at 35, I panted. You're doing great, he said. Plus, if you break something now, at least we have insurance. We grabbed greasy food at the little hole-in-the-wall restaurant we used to hit after skating. The vinyl booths were even more cracked, the menu unchanged. Over burgers and fries, he reached across the table and laced his fingers through mine under the formica. Do you regret divorcing me? He asked quietly. The question punched the air out of my lungs. I regret that it had to happen, I said slowly. I regret that we got to a place where it felt like the only option. But I don't regret not living with that version of you anymore. He nodded, eyes on our joined hands. Fair. Later, we drove out to the Dark Sky Park on the edge of town, the place where he'd proposed. Back then, we'd lain on a blanket under 1,000 stars, and he'd pulled out a ring with trembling hands. Tonight, the sky was just as full, the air just as biting. We spread out a blanket again, this time with a bottle of sparkling grape juice instead of champagne. He popped the top, the soft fizz loud in the quiet night. There's something I should tell you, he said, staring up at the stars. Okay? My stomach clenched. After we got outed, he began. My dad did not take it well. I snorted. That's an understatement. You know some of it, he said. The yelling, the Bible verses. But there's more I never told you because I was ashamed, I guess. He took a breath. He tried to send me to one of those places, therapy, to fix me. My head snapped toward him. What? Yeah, he laughed. But there was no humor in it. He had a whole pamphlet. Weekend retreats. Reclaim your true self. I went to one meeting and walked out after 15 minutes. Told him if he ever tried to make me go back, I'd never speak to him again. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Because I didn't want you to know how little he thought of us, of me. Also because part of me wondered if he was right. That maybe if I could just change, everything would be easier. He rolled onto his side to face me. He still refuses to call you anything but my Paul. Even now. He tells people we tried a phase, and it didn't work out. The shame. That's part of what pushed me down. It wasn't just the drinking. The drinking was a symptom. I thought back to all the nights he'd come home quiet and brittle after visiting his parents, how the drinking had always been worse then. I'd chalked it up to family stress, but I hadn't understood the depth. So our marriage wasn't just fighting addiction, I said slowly. It was fighting your dad and his church and years of this. Yeah, he said, and I never let you all the way in on that. That's on me. We lay there under the stars, the weight of his confession pressing down along with the cold. He reached for my hand, tentative. I'm sorry, he said, for not telling you, for making you fight a battle you didn't know we were in. I squeezed his fingers. I'm sorry I didn't see how deep it went. We shared the grape juice, the bubbles tickling my nose. When he leaned in for a kiss, it was hesitant, like our first one in this same spot years ago. His lips were warm, familiar and new at the same time. As we pulled apart, I realized that I wasn't just getting back with a guy who'd stopped drinking. I was choosing someone who was still carrying years of buried homophobia and trauma, someone whose family still saw me as a problem. The next morning, I woke up in his bed to weak sunlight leaking around the blinds, and his arm draped heavy over my waist. For a second, half asleep, it felt like we'd never split. My body relaxed into the warmth, a terrifying, overwhelming sense of rightness washing over me. Then reality caught up. The divorce, the years apart, the fact that this was not a casual sleepover. This was a massive, risky step. In his tiny kitchen, we drank coffee out of mismatched mugs. A little plant sat on the windowsill, somehow alive. Progress. We should do therapy together this time, he said, stirring sugar into his cup. Not just individually, couples stuff. If we're really doing this. Yeah, I said, nodding before my brain could remind me of my student loans and the cost of a good therapist. That makes sense. On the drive home, my hands clenched the steering wheel. Was getting back together supporting his recovery, giving him stability and love? Or was I risking both of our hard-won stability by re-entangling our lives too soon? At work, my manager called me into his office again. This time, it wasn't about mistakes. You seem distracted, he said kindly. I remember how rough things got when you were going through the divorce. Just keep an eye on yourself, okay? Protect your progress. His words stuck with me. Protect your progress, not just Mark's. That evening, Luna came over with takeout and a look that said she'd been holding back questions all day. So, she demanded, before I'd even put the food on plates. So, we went skating, I said, into the diner, in the Dark Sky Park. Oh my God, you did the greatest hits tour, she groaned. Alex, I laughed, then sobered. We also talked about his dad. He tried to send him to one of those Fix You camps. He's still weird about us. She winced. Yikes. I showed her my phone. Mark had posted a photo of us at the rink, hands intertwined, captioned, "Second chances." My notifications were a disaster. Luna pulled up a group chat with some of our mutual friends, screenshots of the post, messages like, "Oh no, here we go again," and "Guess he likes chaos," and "Relapses happen, just saying." My stomach dropped. I hate people, I muttered. You know they're not entirely wrong to be worried, Luna said gently. But also, this is a lot of talking about you without talking to you. I typed out a long message defending Mark, outlining his sobriety, our boundaries, our therapy plan. Then I deleted it and set the phone face down. Leaving it on red? Luna asked. For now, I said. I don't have the energy to be the PR rep for our relationship. Later, as I was doing dishes, my phone buzzed again. Mark, my dad wants to grab lunch this weekend. I'd like you there. I stared at the screen, the water running over my hands. Facing Mark's father had always been a sore spot, but doing it now as the ex-husband he's dating again felt like walking into a minefield. If this was real, if we were really trying, it was about to go public in the hardest way possible. We met Greg at a bland chain restaurant off the highway, the kind with fake plants and laminated menus, sticky from years of kids' hands. He was already seated when we walked in, posture stiff, napkin folded neatly in his lap. So you two are hanging out again? He said by way of greeting, eyes flicking between us. Hi, Greg, I said, forcing a smile. Good to see you. Alex? He nodded, lips pressed tight. Still working at that little coffee shop? I work in an office now, I said. But I make better coffee than they do. He grunted, clearly uninterested. The server came, took drink orders. Greg made a point of ordering a beer, then seemed to think better of it and changed to iced tea. I caught the flicker of something on his face when he glanced at Mark, like he was trying to be supportive but resented having to think about it. So, he said once we'd ordered, the divorce. Guess it proved this phase wasn't permanent after all. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. This phase? Greg shrugged, looking at his menu like it held the secrets of the universe. You know, young people, experimenting. You tried it, it didn't work out. Now you're older, wiser. I opened my mouth, anger bubbling up, but Mark beat me to it. Dad, he said calmly, Alex isn't a phase. He's my partner. He was my husband. And I'm not sick or confused. Greg's eyes flicked to our joined hands under the table. I hadn't even realized Mark had reached for me until then. You know I was scared, Greg said quietly. You and your brother, you both. It's not what I pictured, and then you're drinking. His voice broke a little. I almost lost you, Mark. I did lose your brother. The mention of Mark's younger brother, who'd died in an accident years before, hung heavy over the table. I was wrong, Greg continued. About a lot of things, I can admit that. But I still think this makes life harder for you. I looked at him properly then. The lines around his eyes had deepened. His hair was more gray than brown. Underneath the stubbornness and the casual dismissal of my relationship, there was genuine fear. Fear of funerals, of empty chairs at family dinners. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to write him off as just another bigot. Another part saw a dad who'd watched one son die, and another nearly drink himself to death and had latched onto the easiest explanation he could find. Us. As we stood to leave, Greg put a hand on my arm, surprising me. If you're back, he said gruffly, not quite meeting my eyes, don't let him slip again. The unfairness of it hit me like a wave. I was not Mark's keeper. I was not a therapist or a sponsor. And yet everyone seemed to be handing me pieces of him to hold. How much responsibility am I willing to shoulder this time, I wondered, as we walked to the car. A few days later, Mark posted the rink photo. Second chances, the caption read. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Some comments were pure joy. OMG, my favorite couple is back. Love this for you two. Others were knives wrapped in concern. Please be careful. Don't forget why you left. Relapses happen. At Sunday dinner, my mom stirred gravy while I scrolled, my anxiety rising. Are you sure you're not just lonely? She asked quietly, not unkindly. It's been a while since you've dated. I'm sure I'm lonely, I said. I'm just not sure that's why I'm doing this. In the living room, Jenna refused to even look at my phone when I tried to show her the photo. I don't need to see it to know how it ends, she said, arms crossed. We went to an intake session with a couples therapist, Dr. Patel, the following week. Her office was cozy with soft chairs and a diffuser that smelled like lavender instead of old coffee. She handed us each a notepad. I want you both to write down boundaries and deal breakers, she said. What you need to feel safe in this relationship, and what would mean you need to step away. My hand hovered over the paper. Words spilled out. No drinking. No secrets about cravings. No disappearing for days. No lying about meeting attendance. Space for me to have feelings, too. Not just be the strong one. Mark wrote furiously, then put his pen down, breathing out slowly. After we shared our lists, Dr. Patel nodded. This is a good start, but remember, boundaries are only as strong as your willingness to enforce them. She looked at me. If Mark relapses or stops treatment, what's your safety plan? I swallowed. I leave, at least temporarily. I go to my sister's. I call you. I don't pretend it isn't happening. Mark nodded, eyes on his hands. I'll sign anything Alex needs, he said. Agreements, releases, whatever. In the parking lot afterward, the winter sun already low, he leaned against his car, twisting his chip between his fingers. There's something I need to tell you, he said. My stomach dropped. Okay, I flushed my last emergency bottle, the night before our first coffee. I'd been holding on to it, hidden, just in case, even though I hadn't touched it in over a year. I stared at him. You still had a bottle? Yeah, he winced. 2 years sober on paper, but there was still this escape hatch in my head. I told myself it was just a reminder of who I was, but I think I kept it so I wouldn't have to fully commit. The night before we met up, I poured it down the sink, because I knew if I was going to even see you, I couldn't have that in my closet. I didn't know whether to be grateful he'd gotten rid of it or furious he'd had it at all. So you're telling me now, I said slowly, after we've started this again, after we've gone to therapy. I know, he said quickly. And I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. I just didn't want you to think the 2 years were a lie. They weren't. I didn't drink it, but it was a secret, and that's not okay. Standing there in that parking lot, I realized I wasn't reuniting with a finished product, some shiny after version of Mark. I was choosing to be with someone who was still very much in process, and so was I. That night at my place, I paced the living room while he sat on the couch, twisting his chip, looking more like the man in the lawyer's office than the guy on the ice. The hidden bottle feels like a betrayal, I said finally, stopping in front of him. Even if you didn't drink it, it was a secret. Secrets about alcohol are kind of the whole problem. I know, he said, eyes meeting mine. You're right. I don't want to treat you like a patient, I went on. I don't want to be your warden, but I also can't do this if there are pockets of your life I'm not allowed to look into. I need full honesty about this stuff, or I'm out. He nodded, shoulders slumping. I kept it as a reminder of who I was story for myself. That's what I told my sponsor. But hearing you say it, I realized it was more than that. I'm sorry, he took a breath. You can see my apartment anytime. My car, my meeting list. I'll send you my AA schedule, not because you're my babysitter, but because I want you to know there aren't any more closets. We sat at my kitchen table with a template Dr. Patel had given us and drafted a written agreement. Therapy attendance, no alcohol in shared spaces, immediate disclosure of cravings, no secret stashes, no minimizing if something goes wrong. When we were done, we both signed it. I slid the paper into a folder where I'd kept our old marriage license, the edges soft from being handled too much. The weight of that choice settled over me. I wasn't blindly jumping back in. I was stepping in with eyes wide open, paperwork in hand. At the door, as he was leaving, he paused. If I ever make you feel like you're drowning again, he said quietly, you walk. Don't wait 3 years. Don't wait for a DUI. Just go. My heart pounded. Okay, I said, same for you. A few weeks later, our new systems got their first real test. He called one Thursday night, voice tight. I'm outside a bar with my coworkers, he said. They're inside, I'm in my car, and I'm having a rough night. Stay there, I said immediately. I'm coming. When I pulled into the parking lot, he was sitting in the driver's seat, engine off, breathalyzer device blinking patiently. He rolled down the window. Hey, he said, giving me a weak smile. Guess it's good this thing still annoys me enough to stop me. We ended up driving to a nearby fast food place, getting fries and shakes, and parking under the neon glow. He talked through his cravings, the way the smell of beer as his coworkers went in had hit him like a wave. I didn't want to white-knuckle it alone, he said, dipping a fry in his shake like he always had. That's when I get stupid. Calling me is using the plan, I said. That's good. At our next session, Dr. Patel actually smiled, which felt like getting a gold star in couples therapy. You used your safety plan, she said. That's huge. She turned to me. Do you feel more like a partner now, or still like a caretaker? I thought about the parking lot, the fries, the way he'd been vulnerable instead of defensive. More like a partner, I said. But I still worry about becoming the strong one who never gets to fall apart. Mark reached for my hand. I want you to tell me when you need support, he said. Not just be the rock. I can't promise I'll always handle it perfectly, but I'll try not to shut down. Later that week, Luna met Mark for coffee. I gave them space, pacing my apartment like a dad waiting for his kid's report card. When my phone buzzed, I grabbed it instantly. Luna. Okay, he's different this time. I'll still roast him, but I'm cautiously on board. I exhaled so hard I got lightheaded. That night, curled up together on his couch, some terrible reality show playing in the background, Mark whispered, I don't know if we'll ever remarry. I don't want to rush anything, but I want forever with you, in whatever form you'll have me. I rested my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Let's just do today, I said, and then tomorrow, and then the next day. Months later, I woke up in his bed again. This time, when I reached over, my hand found warm skin and a sleepy groan instead of cold sheets, and an empty indentation. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. In our shared kitchen, because at some point slowly and deliberately, we'd started spending more nights together than apart. A magnetized copy of our written agreement hung on the fridge. Next to it was the rink photo, edges slightly curled, both a little crumpled, both still there. At a family barbecue in my mom's backyard, Mark stood by the cooler, refilling his glass with sparkling water. Jenna watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She came over to where I was arranging burger buns. If he keeps showing up like this, she said quietly, I'll try too. It wasn't a full endorsement, but from Jenna it was practically a parade. Greg came to town for Mark's birthday that fall. He hovered awkwardly in our doorway, holding a card. This is for you two, he said, thrusting it at me. The front was a generic, balloons, confetti. Inside, in his neat block letters, it said, To my son and his partner, wishing you many healthy years ahead. Greg. I tucked it into the folder with our agreement and old license. When he wasn't looking, my hand's a little shaky. We celebrated Mark's 3-year sober anniversary at his AA meeting. I sat in the back, listening as people shared. When it was his turn, he stood, chip in hand. I'm Mark, and I'm an alcoholic, he said. 3 years today. He looked over at me, eyes bright. This is my partner, Alex, he added. The love of my life and my second chance. Driving home that night, highway lights flickering past, I thought about the lawyer's office, the kitchen floor, the holding cell, the ice rink, the dark sky park, the million tiny choices that had led us back to each other. I still didn't know if leaving him had been cruel or necessary. Maybe it had been both. Maybe we both had to break, separately, before we could even think about rebuilding anything together. That night, as we crawled into bed, he set his chip on the nightstand, next to my glasses. I turned off the light, the room going soft and dark. Do you ever wish we'd just stuck it out the first time? He asked into the quiet. Sometimes, I admitted. Then I remember how bad it was, and I think we might not be here at all if we had. He hummed, pulling me closer. Instead of chasing a perfect answer, a clean moral verdict on whether I'd been right or wrong to leave, I focused on the weight of his arm around me, the feel of his breath on the back of my neck, the magnet on our fridge, the card from his dad tucked in a folder. I decided right then that I would keep choosing him and myself, one honest, terrifying day at a time. Outside, the town was quiet. Inside in the dark, we slept. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough.